When I was a child, I was terrified of the witch in The Wizard of Oz. I'm sure I wasn't alone in that. Her high-pitched voice, her flying monkeys were enough to scare a child out of sleep for a week. And if I could get past that, and I could side with Dorothy and her team, I could find in me something else. If I could get far into that journey with them, something was always revealed. The wizard, who was a fumbling man behind a curtain, not what he pretended to be. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, the famous line from Oz in his booming voice says, as it's revealed that he is just a man behind the curtain. And Dorothy asks, "Who are you?" She asks that 2 or 3 times. She declares, "You're a very bad man," to which the wizard replies, "Oh no, my dear, I am a very good man. I am just a very bad wizard." In Iris Dement's song poem we are looking at today, Whole Lotta Heaven, our poem for the week, there's another curtain. She does simply in the first lines what many of you have done, traded promises of the straight and narrow path led by prophets, telling you the way to the truth for a different kind of heaven. Our church is familiar with this move in life, unshackled by traditional ideas of having to have one way to a reward. We choose a faith that asks more questions than gives answers. And we're comfortable with that. And most of us, agnostic on the afterlife, focus on the here and now. What can we change? What can we participate in? And I'm guessing Miss Dement came to similar conclusions in her life. And I hear her quickly follow the dismissal of the traditional with a plea to pull back the curtain, to acknowledge the river of tears that we are in, to look deeper at life and take in the small diamonds that shine even in that river, sorrow and pain. We're familiar with this lesson, but sometimes not so successful with it. At first glance, the poem song separates us from those who are self-righteous about their faith and creates an us-them perspective. But listen to the words. It says, "I have been saved by the love of the people around me." The act of just allowing ourselves to be loved, to be truly loved, means we have to pull back the curtain to show each other that we are standing in that river, to acknowledge that we are in this river of pain and suffering together, which is so very human, but also contains diamonds. Some of us aren't so good at doing that, at living close up. We tend to defend and point to others' choices as the wrong choices instead of pulling back the curtain and revealing who we are. Dement pushes us further. She acknowledges what we're all thinking these days when she says, "Sometimes I wake up in the morning thinking I could buckle neath the weight of my fears. It's some pain, some strain, and some struggle, but I persevere." I don't know about you, but that sums up my experience of our moment. As the pandemic rages on, unsure sometimes of what we can and can't do, should and shouldn't do, we can give in to fear and strain. But we know the answer is perseverance. And she reminds us again, we persevere because we have a whole lot of heaven around us. And it's reflected back in this sorrow of tears. And it requires that we pull back the curtain of who we are. A member of our church who was in the poetry class Monday wrote to me after the class and said, "Pull back that curtain and suddenly light streams directly in, illuminating what is already there. Suddenly you see diamonds shining on the water, even when that water is life's inevitable river of tears. In that light," she said, "you realize heaven is here and it's now and it's love." I hear the wizard reminding us. We're not always good at being human, but we are good wizards. We prefer the curtain closed, the privacy, the way to remain guarded, to being known, even though that love is in the heaven revealed. I tell you, I'm preaching to myself today, as usual. A reminder to pull the curtain means to show what is all there, that heaven, the diamonds, the pain, and all of it. And as I thought about Iris Dement and her song poem, her urge to each of us to find that heaven and not to wait to receive it, but just to seek it out inside of ourselves and in our lives, I thought this song poem is not just about you and me. It is not just a personal song each of us is singing. It's about us. It's about our country. It's about our history. And on this Independence Day weekend, I thought how appropriate it is. When my immigrant relatives came to America, they risked life and limb to come to a land of plenty, a land where the streets were paved with gold and anything was possible. Some of them left religious restrictions, and some left murderous governments, and some left for love. All came for the streets paved with gold and promise. There's this amazing scene in the film, The Golden Door. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it to you. It's about my people, Italian immigrants docked on Ellis Island with only a view of New York City that only a fraction of them would ever walk into. The scene is crowds of them around a window. They've been landed on the island in quarantine as Ellis Island officials comb through their hair for lice and test them for intelligence. They climb up on a window to peer through and see the golden streets of America. For them, the skies were bluer than home. Hope was bright. The reality they faced were immigration officers questioning whether they should mix with American citizens, checking their teeth like animals. Now, I know these immigrants didn't face the kind of indignity and violence that enslaved people who were brought here endured, but the scene in The Golden Door pointed to two things: the dream of America as a place paved with wealth for everyone, and the hope for the American dream to lift us all. That was the narrative I was raised on. It has taken years to unlearn it, to see the greatness of our country and to see its underbelly. So many recently have recollected Langston Hughes' reminder that America was never America for all. But I like the line from James Baldwin better. He says, "People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. Love takes off masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within." I love America, he says, more than any country in this world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. Baldwin concludes, American history is longer, larger, more various, more beautiful, and more terrible than anything anyone has ever said about it. Baldwin was always good at holding the dichotomies in love. And that is my hope for us all today. Whether we are Americans or somewhere around the world, to love your country and to hold it accountable for its missteps while making a difference, however you can, to make it a better place. That is the mission of any citizen of the world. That is me saying to you, let me repeat it so you can quote it, to love your country and to hold it accountable for its missteps, while making a difference however you can to make it better. That is the mission of the citizen of the world. And that means pulling back the curtain as well. I love our country. I love its landscape, its diversity, its innovative spirit, its culture, its hopes, its dreams. And I challenge it to live up to its ideals that it has never lived up to for all I heard recently the presidential candidate, Native American Mark Charles, ask pointedly, do we want to be a nation where we, the people, actually means all the people? Because if we do, he says, then we have some foundational level work to do. Hear these words of Mark Charles, Native American and presidential candidate. He says, I want you to understand how our history has dehumanized the indigenous people. I want you to understand how our history has dehumanized Africans who have been brought to this nation as slaves. I want you to understand the ongoing legacy. See, we, the people in the United States, has never meant all the people. We, the people, has meant men, white men, land-owning white men, and few others. So it should surprise no one that in 2019, women earned 80 to 85 cents to the dollar. The Constitution's working, he says. No one should be surprised that our prisons are filled with people of color. Our Constitution's working. We act outraged that in 2010, the Supreme Court sided with Citizens United and ruled that corporations now have the same rights to political free speech as individuals. This opens the door for super PACs, unlimited support to candidates. This should not surprise us. The Constitution is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's protecting the interests of white land-owning men, and we don't know what to do with this. We, the people, has never meant all the people, he says. And this is the conversation we need to have. Well, I'm not endorsing Mark Charles for president. I'm not endorsing any one candidate. I am endorsing the idea that we celebrate July 4th this weekend as we ponder the question in this invitation. Is this country really for all the people? And what is our legacy? These aspects of our history have been highlighted this summer in the street protests over policing inequities, in voting rights violations, in our government's deal-making with China in exchange for support in elections at the expense of religious minorities, in the pandemic, lifting the curtain again on who gets access to health care, and the list goes on. By no stretch of the imagination are we the country we all want. Charles says it never was. July 4th says at least its foundation is strong, and all of this is what we are questioning. I say this conversation we need to have starts with not in perpetuating the story of America for all, or anything can happen here, or patriotism without dissent. We should not blindly fly the flag and pretend we're all okay, because we aren't. We don't have golden streets. We're far from it. We don't have justice for all. We see that every day. We don't even have a land of the brave anymore, it seems, but we do have a great resource, one that is never counted by the stock market or put into retirement funds. We have one another. Iris Dement again says, we've only got each other and the love we carry in our souls. Though this world's full of trouble and the path we walk is never clear, there's still this whole lot of heaven shining in this river of tears. If Dement is singing about our country, I think she is saying it's love of country and fellow citizens that will save us. Knowing this river of tears flows deeply through our history, that we cannot do anything about the past, we can only change the future. We can listen deeply and learn and make hopes reality, and we can hold each other in our pain and accountable. We can lift up our country and declare once and for all that we will make it for all people, not just for some. An Indigenous leader from Canada, George Erasmus, says that where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. If you want to build community, he says, you have to start by creating a common memory. If we fly the flag this weekend with the memory that is based on a mythological history of discovery and expansion, opportunity and exceptionalism, we will fail each other. If we fly the flag and say we love this country, acknowledging what communities of color have lived through experience of stolen lands and broken treaties and slavery and Jim Crow laws and segregation and boarding schools and mass incarceration and internment camps and families separated at our borders, and we have all suffered from these transgressions, then maybe we can increase love. We can create common memory, and we have a chance at saving our country. If we can acknowledge that all is not well in our land, far beyond the pandemic that sweeps through it is the illness of greed and power that are much more dangerous than any temporary virus. We might remember that we have a great resource. We have each other. We might put on our masks. We might stay home even when we are dying to do something else. We might do our parts to stand for something in our lives. And we might have a chance at loving each other into the freedom that we declare on this weekend. Mark Charles says this: we've been spending so much time arguing about when we were last great and when we might be great again, and we're not talking about the fact that we live in a nation that has never decided it just wants to treat everybody as human. We have each other, all of us. We have a country not of golden streets and mansions, but of dichotomies. Dichotomies in need of repair, revealed by pulling back the curtain, diamonds and pain. A good man, but a lousy wizard we have been as a country. A people who struggle to see each other, but are also filled with the will to make it right for all, even while we feel so divided. We can do this. That is all of what we should be celebrating this weekend. That is our hope and our dream, that if we pull back the curtain, we see that this is a country that can be loving and compassionate and active and lift up voices of those pressed down, and we can create a common memory, and this can be a country of hope and honor that we all want to live in. So my question for you today is, do you want to be a citizen of a nation where we, the people, truly means all the people? And if so, how will you help it become so? The song poem of our day today concludes with a simple reflection, a simple statement that urges us forward no matter how difficult the task. It says, I'll take the whole lot of heaven, it's shining. I want the whole lot of heaven, it's shining. I love the whole lot of heaven, it's shining in this river of tears. Be well this weekend and this week, my friends. Be well, and amen.